Okay. Well, let's. Yeah, I think we can begin. I'm Robert Buxton, and it's great to be here. I'm going to play mostly classical piano and talk about it. I talk a lot, explain what to listen for, and usually, and at the very end, I like to play some old-time gospel music. So the first thing I want to do is, well, improvise, because that's what they did 200 years ago. If you were to go back in time to Chopin, Mozart, Beethoven, you name it, they all improvised. And here's a question I have for today's improvisation. Anyone's birthday today or around now? Recent birthdays? No? Well, there's probably someone who's, because I was thinking I would take the melody, Happy Birthday, and improvise around it. What are some classical composers you enjoy listening to? Anybody? Your favorites?
Chopin.
Okay, so I could do Happy Birthday in his style. Let's see.
Oh, wow, really?
Well, I can try. I don't know. It's improvising, so.
Ooh.
Let's see. So something like that. Thank you very much. I like to just do those things, to play around with it. I don't know if all of that really worked. But I want to play now some real music, some actual music, not just some silly improvisation this is from an opera, because in the mid-18th century, operas were the pretty much only entertainment they had. There was no TV, radio. Like, what would you do on a Friday night is you go to the opera. And I think people forget that, because there was that actor, Timothy Chalamet, recently. He said nobody cares about opera. It's been in the news. And I can't disagree more. At least they did back then. So, this is from an opera by Gluck, G-L-U-C-K. He was a Viennese opera composer in the mid-18th century. This is from his opera Orpheus, which is the Orpheus and Eurydice myth from ancient Greece. So recall the story is that, Eurydice dies, goes to the underworld, and Orpheus can't accept this loss. They're married, by the way. And he goes with his harp. He has this harp that he plays with. Goes to the underworld, plays for Hades, and pleads with him, please let my wife come back with me. And Hades says, okay, you can do that, she can go with you, but one condition, don't look back when you're taking her. There's the same phrase in the Bible, in the Old Testament, don't look back, right? And Unfortunately, Orpheus looks back at the last moment and loses her forever. So it's a tragic story. In the opera, they change the story. And at the very end, Eurydice just comes back and they have this big party and everyone lives happily ever after. It's nice. But this piece is the melody. It's an instrumental interlude, and it is a mournful piece. It's an elegy. And the arrangement is by an Italian 19th century composer named Giovanni Scambati. It's a beautiful name. So this is Gluck Scambati. It's a double, Gluck Scambati melody from Orpheus. It's a very sad piece. It's a beautiful and sad piece. So yeah, if you just came in, that was Gluck melody from the opera Orpheus from about 1761, arranged by Scambati in the 1800s. So I think classical music, even if it's very old like that, it's relevant to our lives today. Why? Because people haven't changed that much since, since history, since the past. Like, I know that's almost 300 years old, but the experience of losing a loved one, unfortunately, is a universal thing. And that's what that music is about. If you had the experience of losing a loved one, you get it. That's it. The next piece is a very familiar one, but I can't sing. I'm sorry, I really singing, it sounds really good in my mind. And then when I open my mouth, It's really miserable. So there have been people who say anyone can sing, try it, and then I'll sing one note, they'll say, you know what, maybe not anybody can sing. Stick to piano. This is Ave Maria by Schubert, but arranged for piano by Franz Liszt. I love arrangements because an arrangement allows you to pretend to be something you're not. I can pretend to be Pavarotti or Maria Callas or these singers who sing this so beautifully. Here's something about the Ave Maria by Schubert that I didn't know until recently. You hear it sung in Latin to the Hail Mary prayer, but that's not what Schubert wrote it to. He used a different text, another prayer to Mary, but an excerpt of the poem The Lady of the Lake by Sir Walter Scott. Completely different thing. So that's something you can tell your friends tonight at dinner. Hey, did you know the original text for Ave Maria is different? Schubert died at 31 in 1828. And his last few years were plagued with illness. He knew he didn't have time. And he wrote incessantly. That's when he wrote this piece in his last years. And when he died, he was, he had nothing. He was penniless and unknown, virtually. After he died, composers came across his music and they discovered it kind of and promoted it, especially Liszt, who did this arrangement. Liszt was so moved by Schubert's music that he kind of came across. He did these arrangements and played them in his early recitals in the 1840s, popularizing him. We could be grateful to Liszt for having Schubert today be so popular. So what Liszt does here, he presents the melody in the beginning, pretty straightforward, like. It's pretty much the Ave Maria. But then he does things like this later, like. I mean, you hear all those things in the right hand I'm doing. That's not in the original Ave Maria. Liszt added that in. So again, this is Schubert arranged by Liszt, Ave Maria.
I've never heard that again. So good.
Thank you, thank you.
Very good.
Thank you. So now that's Schubert. Now I'm going to play some Schumann. Oh, thank you. Schubert, Schumann, it sounds kind of similar. By the way, some people in the South, they like to call Schubert, they call him Sherbert, you know. But Schumann was different. He was a different composer, very influenced by Schubert. And I'm going to play two pieces by him now. Robert Schumann was born in 1810. And you know, you've heard stories of like Mozart, Mendelssohn, they were born and they just had this musical gift from day one, practically. But Schumann was not like that. You know, he was going to Heidelberg University in Heidelberg to be a lawyer and he failed miserably. They say that it saved the world from a bad lawyer and added a good composer. Well, then next he decided he wanted to be a novelist. That didn't quite work. And then he wanted to be a virtuoso pianist, but he hadn't been a child prodigy. So he got this teacher named Frederick Wieck and practiced like crazy. And two things happened. One was he actually destroyed his hands. So that didn't work out. And then he fell in love with his teacher's daughter, Clara Wieck. They fell in love with each other. And the dad strictly forbade the marriage. So then there was that. And so it's like everything failed for him. And then he turned to composition. And some of his earliest compositions he did were arrangements of Paganini. I'm going to play one of those. Paganini was this violinist at that time, in the early 19th century. Paganini was like Elvis or Little Richard, but he was like a wild man. He was like a rock star. And Schumann, Liszt, they all wanted to be like him. And that's why, you know, Schumann did these arrangements of Paganini. So, a couple more things. Schumann had bipolar disorder. And you're going to hear the manic side and the depressed side in these pieces. The first piece I'm going to play, it's manic. It's very manic. he wrote this also at that time that he was wanting to marry his teacher's daughter. They eventually did get married, and her name Clara Wieck. She became Clara Schumann. Probably she was a great musician herself. So actually more on her in a bit. But this is one of the Paganini caprices, originally for solo violin, but in Schumann's piano arrangement. Like the violin piece sounds like this. But then Schumann adds Schumann to it, basically. And he changes the whole character of it. So. So I told you that's a very manic piece. You can hear he had bipolar. And the second piece I'm going to play of Schumann's, this is the complete opposite. It's like, it's so calm, it's even too calm. It's eerie. I have a story about a friend I know who's over 100, and I saw him around Christmas, and he was too calm. It was like he was not feeling good, he was under the weather, and it was sad. I left feeling sad because he was just too calm. And I saw him about a month ago, and he was all upbeat again and happy, and I said, looks like you're feeling better, like what happened? He said, yeah, you must be wondering what happened. He said, I got into 2 arguments with people this morning, and it brought back my mood. I'm not suggesting conflict as a way to feel better, but sometimes life needs a little conflict. And what happened to Schumann around this time, several things. So he gets married. They had a great marriage, they had many children. Robert Schumann was a very good father. Not most of the classical composers were not, but he was. And he wrote all these pieces with the theme of childhood. This is from a set. This is called Abend Evening Song, from a suite called Music for Children Young and Old. And I love that title. It's a beautiful title. So Schumann, this childhood thing was a big theme in his later years. his wife was much more famous than him in those days. And she would leave home for months on end to perform, you know. And so Robert Schumann was kind of home like a stay-at-home dad a lot of the time. Sadly, you know, his mental health started to really deteriorate, and he heard voices. And this is around the time he wrote this piece. He jumped in the Rhine River in winter, and he was rescued by fishermen. But then he spent years living in an asylum, which in those days was nothing like, I mean, it was like a prison home. No visitors allowed. After 2 years, Clara snuck in to see him. And the next day, he was gone at 46. He died. And this is the music he wrote around that time. You might expect that he would write something very angry or very disturbing. It's the opposite. It's complete, you know, serene music. That's this piece. It's very quiet, actually. So, Abend Lied by Robert Schumann. Something a little longer, and there's a connection with what you just heard. When Schumann wrote that in early 1850s, I think, there was a young man that knocked on their door in Dusseldorf. His name was Johannes Brahms, young Brahms. He was looking for advice, and by the way, this was before the beard. Brahms grew a beard. He couldn't grow a beard until he was in his late 40s. Can you believe that? You've seen him. He looks like Santa Claus. I was driving through South Carolina recently, and saw a guy on a Harley Davidson who looked exactly like Brahms. With the beard and the bigger guy. I said, I'm going to go tell him about this. And I start walking over, and I think that this is my wife. She said, don't you do that. You might not get the reaction you want. But so young Brahms, he knocks on their door. This little blonde-haired, blue-eyed kid, basically. And he says, I'm looking for advice. And by the way, I've written 3 piano sonatas. Okay. So there's actually Clara opened the door. Robert Schumann was somewhere. Maybe he was at Walmart. Well, they didn't have Walmart, but you know what I mean. So he comes and he starts playing, and her jaw, drops. And then Robert Schumann comes home and listens to him play. He says, you're a genius. This kid, you're a genius. Why don't you live with us? We'll adopt you. They didn't do background checks in the 1850s. It's a different world back then. So they just let this guy from Hamburg live with them. And at the time that Brahms was kind of living there on and off. Robert Schumann ended up, in the asylum. His health declined. And young Brahms actually helped Clara a lot and the children. He helped out a lot. He almost became a member of the family. Now, Clara was like 15 years older than him, okay? So here's where things get a little People magazine, like, it's all speculation, but when Robert Schumann died, Brahms and Clara and the kids went to Switzerland for a trip, obviously to process the loss. The neighbors thought this was really weird. They said, what is this young 20-something-year-old and this older lady? They must be, dating. There's something going on there. So I read some historians that said, no way. It's not. They had a very close platonic relationship. They admired each other. Brahms probably had some unrequited love towards her, but and you can hear it in his music. Talk about that, but definitely not. But I also read that at a certain point, Brahms and Clara decided to burn all the letters and throw the ashes into the Rhine River, all the letters they had written to each other. That's a little suspicious, don't you think? So again, I don't know, I didn't live in that time period, so it's really not my business, but this is a famous, somewhat myth of the love triangle between Brahms, Clara, and Robert Schumann. So, funny enough, Brahms relied on Clara. He would write letters and he would ask her for advice on any piece that he wrote. And if she didn't like it, he would get rid of it. Not this piece. Clara hated this piece. She called them these wretched witches' variations, that's a pretty bad insult for the 18th and mid-19th century. It's pretty bad. So he didn't listen to her on that. These are the Paganini variations, book 2 of Brahms. Again, there's the Paganini, the violinist Niccolo Paganini. This is based on the famous 24th Caprice by Paganini, which that's a very famous, theme. Everybody from, Liszt to even Andrew Wood, whoever did their version of that. So Rachmaninoff, talk about that too later. So this is the book 2 of the Paganini variations, and it's kind of a noisy piece. Brahms thought he was just writing exercises for the fingers, and then turned out they were more interesting than exercises, so he changed the title. But they're still very obnoxious to play. Not to listen to, but they're just, very gnarly in the fingers. But listen to the quiet parts. That's where maybe you hear Brahms's feelings for Clara. Again, I'm harping too much on this story, but is this normal music for a 29-year-old? Let me play, There's too much heartache in there, where this. There's something there, hard to explain. And Brahms was from Hamburg, which is in the far north in Germany. It's a cold, rainy city. And people in Hamburg, I know people from Hamburg, and let me tell you, they are not emotionally expressive. That's a big understatement. They're like, you know. And Brahms was like, it doesn't mean that they don't have emotion. It's all inside. And that's the thing with Brahms. When you listen to Brahms, you might think, he's a little bit distant, he's a little bit cold. But listen more, and you'll find there's like a volcano of feeling underneath the surface. So these are the variations on the Paganini variations by Brahms, Book 2. So, work, a lot of work. And so, you know, Rachmaninoff wrote the Paganini Rhapsody. And I'm trying to do the whole thing. The trouble with it is it's for piano and orchestra. And so I'm making my own arrangement. I'm trying to put all the orchestra together with the piano because I can't, travel around with the orchestra. So I want to play you the famous excerpt of that piece. This is the 18th variation. And so, first of all, Rachmaninoff wrote this in 1935. He had left Russia in 1917 when the revolution happened. Never went back. And of course he didn't want to go back because, communist Russia was no place to be. But he was so nostalgic for it. This is a familiar thing, so a little personal thing. My mother is from Russia, and she came in the 1980s here, has never gone back, doesn't want to go back. But she misses the Russian culture, cooks Russian food all the time, talks about it. Russian nostalgia is this heavy, this powerful thing. And so in this variation, it's based on that same Paganini, in the beginning, but 18th variation, he takes that theme and he turns it upside down, like the sheet music, just turns it upside down. And you know what you get is this. You ever heard that before? That's Paganini upside down, that's what it is. It's the most nostalgic thing. There's a movie called Somewhere in Time that uses this. Everyone was telling me about it, so I ended up watching it. It's a great movie. And the movie's about being lost in time travel and nostalgia. And that's what this music is about. So here it is. The thing about missing home is even if you didn't come from communist Russia or something, even if you grew up one block from here, home is a time, not a place. So you can't go home again. There's a novel by the North Carolina Thomas Wolfe novelist. You can't go home again because even if you physically go, it's not the same. And that's, I believe, what Rachmaninoff's music is about. So here is the piece. Here's something that's brand new for me. It's kind of new. It's a famous piece, but I don't know it so well. But I'm trying to break it in by playing it for people. So this is the famous Flight of the Bumblebee by Rimsky-Korsakov, and it's arranged by Rachmaninoff. So more Rachmaninoff. And Rimsky-Korsakov is a Russian composer. This is from an opera he wrote in 1900, 1901 called The Tale of the Tsar Sultan. And in this story, this is the beginning of Act 2. This prince turns himself into a bee, a bumblebee, so he can go see the Tsar. It's really weird. It's Russian fairy tales are very weird. So it really, really sounds like one of those obnoxious flying things that we have outside now. They're everywhere. And I'll play this. I have 2 toddlers, and I'll play this for my 4-year-old I tried an experiment, like how does it really sound like a bee? And I told him this is a bumblebee, and I started to play it for him, you know, like. And he just started like itching. I felt kind of bad for him, but because it really makes you feel like there's some stupid thing flying in your face and you're trying to. That's what it sounds like. So unfortunately, because it's new for me, the bumblebee, like, you know, he crashes into walls sometimes. So I'll do my best with it, but I love the piece. A couple more things, and then one more classical, and then a gospel or 2. This is a Debussy piece. It's a song for voice, and I can't sing. I just can't. So it's an arrangement. This is Il pleure dans mon cœur. It rains in my heart. Paul Verlaine wrote the text. Polish Paul Verlaine. This piece sounds like gentle spring rain. You know, it really. As much as the last one sounds like a bumblebee. You can see the rain almost falling. So, this is a piano arrangement by a guy named Daniel Héricourt. Daniel Héricourt was born in France in 1903. He knew Debussy, he knew Ravel, he knew everybody in music and culture in France at that time. You know where he lived most of his life? It was in Greensboro. I know he lived in Greensboro. So he taught at UNCG, and he got married to a lady named Jane, she's very active. I saw her 2 days ago. And we've become friends. She gives me sheet music from her late husband, including this piece. So Daniel Héricourt was amazing, and Jane is amazing. She was a child prodigy, pianist, amazing. So, and whenever she comes to listen to me perform, I'm scared because, just to have that much history and culture in you is like, so this is the Debussy song arranged by Daniel Merriweather. So it's very French. French music is very subtle. It's like French cooking is all about sauce. There's a lot of musical sauce here. So here it is. So I'm going to close with a little gospel. I play a lot of gospel because this is my background. I told you my mother's an immigrant from the Soviet Union, from Russia. So I'm half Russian. And then my dad's also an immigrant. He comes from Southern Virginia. And so he raised me on all this old-time gospel. This is, where could I go but to the Lord? I'm going to play it in a very, Southern gospel style. So. Sorry, I overstayed my welcome. I think I should probably stop. So thank you, and I will see you sometime soon, hopefully. Yeah, thank you very much for having me.